I think, for example, before I had my own children, and I guess all the parents are like that, I was always saying, like, I will never do that. I will never be a parent like that. I will never scream. I will never say these things.
Hmm.
And of course, the life plans it a different way.
Yeah. So that is today's guest, Lucie Tamasova, who has three children of her own, a 12-year-old boy, a 9-year-old girl, and a 16-month-old toddler. And then there's also her partner's children, and that's another boy and girl, ages 12 and 11. So Lucie has a lot of experience as a parent. And she also has a lot of professional experience with children generally. And I would say hundreds, if not thousands of them. She's a Montessori educator in Europe and has built numerous schools in Africa. And boy, does she have some fascinating stories to share. And one in particular that, for me at least, was pretty shocking. So Lucie and I wound up talking about a few different topics, but looking back now, one stands out, and that's how parents and teachers can do a lot of comparing. Now, some of that comparing can actually be healthy, as we all need to have contrasts in life to learn from, but some of it maybe not too healthy. But I will leave that for you to judge. I hope you enjoy our discussion today, and here we go. The educator Dr. Maria Montessori once said,
"The child developing harmoniously and the adult improving himself at his side make a very exciting and attractive picture."
Welcome to Montessori Education with me, Jesse McCarthy, where we talk raising children and educating students while bettering ourselves right alongside them. Lucie Tamasova, thank you so much for coming on. I'm excited to be chatting with you today.
Thanks for inviting me.
So I thought we would hop into, there was this story when we spoke maybe a year ago. You told me just this experience that was pretty powerful, both for me and I think for you as well, about the challenges you had when you were starting some schools or maybe had some schools in Kenya, and then getting parents to enroll in these schools that you created was a little bit challenging in a unique way that maybe you weren't expecting. And I surely didn't expect when you were telling me the story. So maybe you can just share that to start.
Yeah, it is in a way funny story. On the other way, it's not funny at all. But we opened a couple of schools in Kenya and in Guinea, and some of the schools were opened with the whole community, and the whole community was sending their children in our schools because it was something that we created together. And then we wanted more children to come in the schools so they would become independent and somehow financially stable. And most of these children, I would say half of them were coming to school for free because the families couldn't afford to pay any school fees. And some of them were paying. And I was surprised that even some of the parents who even, didn't have to pay anything, they were worried because we were claiming that we are a nonviolent school, a school that respects children and school where we want to treat the children differently than at normal government schools. And these parents were so worried that we will spoil their kids because we will not be hitting them, because we will not be using canes. And they were saying, okay, we are not sending kids to that school because that's the school that will, show them only how to, misbehave. And they are using these words that I didn't expect that they would be using. And yeah, so that was one of our challenges that we had. And it was surprising.
Yeah. So when you told me this, I thought, like, I've never in my life heard that say a mom or dad doesn't want to send their children to school because the teachers there are not hitting their children.
Yes.
It's just, and it's so remarkable. And it's, from our mindset, or at least I know here in the States, in some places, people are definitely still hitting their children, or at least, like spanking and so forth. But in the Montessori community, the idea of parents saying that is just so crazy.
It is. It
So
is.
how, because this is an interesting thing that I think we'll talk a little bit more about, but how did you deal with, because you could immediately say, oh my gosh, what horrible people that hit their children and want that, but that's not going to help you in getting children into the school. So how did you deal with this situation?
Well, we did a couple of sessions with these parents where we tried to explain that discipline doesn't have to be only about hitting the child or spanking the child, that we will require some discipline at the school, and we will make sure that that the kids are guided in a way that that will not disappoint them. But it took us some time, and it took us even I would say few years to show that the kids who are leaving our school, they actually know something. Because most of the parents were worried that if the kids will not be pushed by I don't know, by punishments, that then they will not learn anything, that they will leave the school stupid. But then one of our schools later on became one of the best in the county, like in one of the regions in Kenya. So then we had a story to say, and
kind of
no
evidence.
one was afraid anymore. But still, it was a surprise that we had to deal with something like that. It was shocking for me as a European,
Yeah, and I mean I get that in a much more. I don't want to say diluted form, but when, like, say, a father will come in and say, well, I don't want this school to make my child a chicken or something like that, because there's just, it's too kind, that type of thing. But what was interesting to me about this story is not only, I mean, kind of the shock of it to somebody who's, quote, in one of modern society or something like that, but that this is something I think if we really want to be spreading great education and helping parents and teachers to change, it's not an overnight thing that we're just like, hey, this is the best for your child and therefore you should do it. And it's like, I mean, we need evidence as human beings to understand that this is good. And if all you know is that, hey, if my child doesn't listen and if he does, if you don't have discipline, he's not going to make it in the world, then that's what they've seen in their world at that time or in their culture. And I'm just raising that because I don't know if you've experienced this, Lucie, but there tends to be I've seen a lot of people that want to push ideas on people or push Montessori on people when they're not yet ready for it, or they just overload them with information. And the parents on the other end are just looking for, well, I don't know if this is really going to work. Like, do you have any evidence for that? That type of thing. So I don't know if you've seen that more broadly, not just obviously in Kenya or Guinea, but
of course, but it's with all the topics that you want to push. If you push anything, then the other person just closes her ears and doesn't hear anything that we are saying. So I guess when we talk about respectful communication in our schools and with our children, we also need to respect the adults that we are talking with, and also spread our message in a respectful way.
Yeah. And so do you think just your ability to do that has kind of grown and developed through these experiences? Or do you think you were that type of person that was just always like, well, I have to talk very kindly to people and really understand their context so we can connect? Or, how did that develop with you?
Well, I think this multicultural experience is from different places around the world, either in US, Europe, different places in Africa or South America. It definitely helped because it gave me this bird view, I would say, in Czech. I don't know if you have this expression in English, but that you are
like
looking
altitude.
at things. Yeah. And it gives you this option to actually question yourself and the way, if what am I thinking is actually the correct way, or is there any correct way? Because when I come to, and again I will use the example of Kenya, when I come to Kenya and I go to rural areas where, for example, and I will say another, like a shocking example, and and of course it's not normal in all the Kenyan society, but there are villages and there are people where the guy has more wives, and it is a shocking idea. And the first reaction for me as a woman would be, wow, no way.
Yeah.
No, what are you talking about? Or even a different image that was also shocking for me. I don't want to say just these shocking things, but I hope you will understand what I want to emphasize. That, for example, another lady that I met told me that her husband died, and the brother of the husband inherited her.
Oh, God.
And that it is a custom that they have. And I was thinking, what do you mean? What is happening?
Yeah.
And then it took me, it takes lots of inner thinking and re-evaluation of what you believe, to actually have a look at some of the things that you encounter in the world in a way that they don't have to be always bad, even though that you look at them as bad. But for example, this lady, she was happy that it happened because she was lost in a way. She lost her husband, and then she had nowhere to go. She had no place where to stay. And no one was taking care of her children. She was living somewhere in the rural area where, she didn't even have access to water. And this family took her kids, gave her a place to stay, and took care of her and her children. And
yes,
it's something that you have to really question your way of observing.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate that you're kind of like broadening this out almost to how we approach experiences in life generally, whether it's with children, parents, whatever. So and I think it's challenging. There's an element of looking at other cultures, and we have to be able to step back and kind of get that bird's eye view for a moment and see what's actually occurring. Because as you just said, in that particular case, maybe this woman would have died if they wouldn't have taken her into her home. Who knows? And I'm sure that kind of thing happens. But then on the other end, I know there's many stories where, yeah, you're now somebody else's wife, and I don't want to be your wife, and it becomes violent and dangerous. So I like that you're basically saying, when you hear something, let's not immediately jump to, oh, how horrific and horrible. It's like, well, let me get a little bit more context, and then we can judge, does this make sense?
Exactly.
So,
of course, these, for example, the inheritance of wives. Of course, this is not something that should be happening, and the society in Kenya in general says that this shouldn't be happening. Of course. I'm sorry, it was my
no worries. Yeah, and I think you saying that, Lucie, because I sometimes I find that I'll get in a little bit of trouble because I have this very much, I think, when communicating with people and trying to understand other people, you want to be open to where they're coming from and their culture. But at some point, I'll step back and say, if you're hitting your child, like really harming your child, I don't think that's good. If you have a culture in which it's okay, seemingly quote okay, to sell off women, or the parents get to decide where the woman is married to, like, I think that's wrong, and I think that's a wrong across the board, whatever culture. And however, as kind of we're talking about, that's not going to change by condemning somebody who's doing that when they think it's a good thing or they think it's helpful. So it's kind of the balance I try to get. I don't know how you approach it, particularly because you were in this other society that had these, I don't know, norms. Maybe in some villages, it's not easy because you want to judge, but you also want to be able to have an effect. So
I think that's what I had to learn, not to judge and somehow bite my tongue before I say anything.
Yep.
and be more quiet and observe.
Yeah.
And then maybe, when I see that the other person is open for another opinion, then say something when the ears are open to hear something.
Yeah. And I mean, of course, everything we're talking about has nothing to do in particular with Africa or Kenya or Guinea. Cause I mean, I live in Kansas, and I know that I was kind of woken up to the fact that a lot of parents are in America are still definitely hitting their children, maybe spanking and definitely shouting at them like they're not, definitely not in the respected way that in Montessori views children. And it's a norm. So to break a norm, it takes work. So I'm curious. What I've noticed is a lot of people tend to jump to condemnation or jump to judgment of others before looking within. So kind of to move to this topic of bettering ourselves so that we can, for ourselves, but also for the children in our lives. How have you worked towards maybe looking within to better the things in your life or to work on becoming a better educator around children versus that knee-jerk response or I think in a lot of people's lives where you spend a lot of time focused on what other people are doing wrong versus what am I doing right or what can I do better? Like, how have you developed that in your own life?
That's hard to say. I think, for example, before I had my own children, and I guess all the parents are like that, I was always saying like, I will never do that. I will never be a parent like that. I will never scream. I will never say these things,
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the life plans it a different way.
Yeah.
And you see that you are, doing your mistakes, or I don't know how to say that, but things that you are not proud of.
Mm-hmm.
And it gives you some kind of, I would say, humility, to be also open to, to the other people are also doing the best they can.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, for example, when we look at social media or pictures that people are sending, you never send a photo to your friends, or you will never post a photo on Facebook where your child is having a tantrum somewhere, or when you are screaming, or when your house is in a complete mess. People just don't do that. And then when you look at the Instagram pictures, and we talked about it last time, when you compare yourself with others, you don't know what the real truth is. What is behind that picture. If there were 150 other pictures that just didn't go well, and then in that 1 second the child was doing what he was supposed to be doing, and that's the picture that you see. And I guess we shouldn't, but it helps not to compare ourselves to the others, maybe at all, because and maybe see that the others are also doing the best that they can. And that also helped me, in Kenya, when I saw these quote shocking stories. I also tried to see what I can learn from that place, from that parent. And we were also, last time talking about a story, when the mothers are so connected with the children that the children, for example, in rural areas, again, they don't use nappies, and the mom just has the child attached to her body. And when the child needs to pee, or they just take it away, they let her pee, and then they put it back on her body, and they just feel when the child needs to do that, and they just know, because they are somehow connected emotionally. They read the body signs. They read any movement of the child. And I think we don't know how to do that. And this is the same mom that can be hitting the child 2 years later when he does something bad.
Yes. So I and I don't know how it is with you, or if this is just culturally across the world now in most civilized places that have access to social media and they're all over social media. But in America, the comparisons and then the need to always be looking at other people, it's very challenging not to be sucked into it. And as you said, we're getting the best of the best, at least with quote influencers and those type of people. Or what I found interestingly is we sometimes get the people that just want to, since everybody's telling you how good it is, I'm going to tell you how bad it is. And they start going off about how bad their divorce is and their kids are freaking mad. And it just goes to the other extreme. I don't know if you've seen that.
Yes.
But it's so I tend to think of it as, what do I want to accomplish, or what do I want to be like with children, and to work my best to do that. And then when you see these other things, kind of like what you're saying is, let me take the best from what I see, but try not to be constantly making comparisons that are going to bring me down, or on the other end, boost me up. Like, wow, look how good I'm doing compared to this person who's, life is a complete mess or something, So the balance, and I think the way that you're saying, and what I'm getting is that we can look to others, whether within our own cultures or outside, for things that we can improve or that things that we're doing pretty well, and we should be proud of how well we're doing. But it's not in this, I'm worthless or I'm so superior. It's more in how can I grow, and then if you want to aid others, like in our profession, with children and parents, how can I aid other people as well? But again, it's not that constantly striving to be better than the next person, or to, make my house look like the quote perfect Montessori house for children or something like that.
It's more about trying to be the better person that I am. For example, today, I try to be a better person tomorrow. So it is comparing, but maybe myself with my previous myself.
Yeah.
I don't know how to say that.
Yeah, we're constantly developing ourselves in a way. So I'm with you. And I'm curious, since you've experienced so many different places, like I've traveled a lot, so I've seen it, but I think you're more kind of knee deep in these places. What have you seen similarities? And this is just kind of trying to be as objective as we possibly can, not saying, oh, we're not as happy as them or we're happier than them, but what have you seen in happy people, whether they're the children, the parents? Are there similarities that go across? And this, whether it's a Montessori or just general, that maybe we can glean and gain some information from, or data to show, hey, this works, or this is helpful. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. It does. The first thing that comes to my mind when you ask this is community. I feel sometimes that in Europe, or at least here in Czech right now, and especially during COVID, but even before, we are closed behind our doors, and we are very often, even with our children, we are closed at our house alone and not being really part of a bigger community. For example, very many moms are alone with the child the whole day. And of course, that can get stressful, boring, and then you don't give the child the attention all the time, because you just don't have energy for that anymore. And at the places where I have seen, kids really running, happy, and also the parents in a way happy, even though they had much less than we do. They had the community. They are never alone. And the mom, when she is tired, she always has another 4 or 5 other women who can take care of the kid.
Yeah.
And then the kid isn't, for example, when it's a 1-year-old kid, he is never alone. Because he just goes from hand to hand.
Yeah, it's
And this fact of, being outside, being social, communicate with others, talk about our problems, and not on Facebook or not on the phone, but really, talking with the other person. I guess that helps, or
mhm.
that's what I see is helping. Because, when you imagine um, these slum areas, when you have the houses built of mud and maybe some cardboards, you have no electricity, you have no running water, maybe you have no toilets,
Mhm.
and the kids are still happy running around.
Yeah.
The people are sitting in front of the house, because what would they be doing inside when there is no light?
Mhm.
And they are talking with each other, helping each other. um, I guess this power of community um, could make people happier than our individual lives, I
Yeah,
guess.
and I wonder, so funny enough, I was just at this like amazing petting zoo with my wife here in Kansas. And you learn about the different animals, and I knew this, but it was another like eye opener, that you learn about how many of these species that when somebody gives birth, it's kind of like the whole group is aiding in that care in the beginning, at least.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and I think funny enough, I was thinking as we're comparing like different cultures of human beings, but I think it's actually valuable to compare with other animals as well, uh, to see how they do things. And then that's not always the case. There's other species that, like there would be two monogamous parents that raise the child or something, so, uh, but I think we can learn from that, because what you're saying, we all know how valuable having relationships is. And I think this is it's become a cliche, but relationships are more important than things or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt this too in my life, where I meet people and somebody, definitely in America, people like, oh my God, how sad that they don't have money and they're poor. And then you look at those people, like I've met a lot of farmers that came from Mexico that live here, and they're happier than this kind of quote, civilized rich person who's saying, oh, how sad for them, you know? So I think looking at cultures as what's kind of who's enjoying life to an extent versus these other factors that people might think of what's success in life.
Yes.
So I think that's huge. And then I don't know, bringing this to Montessori, I've found, at least in the classroom and then in my own life, that what Montessori does to bring about this community that you're talking about is it first allows children to be content in themselves. So,
Mm-hmm.
because I found it, particularly with children, and then definitely in my own life, that when you feel content in the work that you're doing, in the activities that you're doing, you're so much more willing to aid other people or be friendly with other people. But to the extent that you don't feel satisfied as a person, as an individual, I found this, that you want to lash out. If a child's not, feeling comfortable in math, but his peers are, then it just becomes frustrating. Then he wants to break things and get in fights. But the more that we can kind of become calm inside, I've found that the better we are able to interact with other peers and form community. Now, I don't know how that works where you've been, and if you've seen that, or it's just a part of their culture that everybody's taking care of babies. It doesn't matter what they think of themselves. But I don't know what your take would be on the relationship between how you value yourself and then how you value others in your community.
I think it is 100% truth on where I have been everywhere. Even though, for example, when I think about the very poor areas, when the mom, for example, doesn't know what the kids will be eating in the evening, then of course she will not be happy chatting in front of her house with her neighbors. Probably she
Mm-hmm.
will be nervous running around looking for a job
Mm-hmm.
and asking people, can I wash your clothes, or can I clean up your house, or can I do something for you that that could generate money for feeding my children? And of course that that's not what we were talking about before, the happiness of the community.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess you are right. And yeah, I have seen that everywhere, I guess. Even
One,
though I have seen even, many kids, I would say, for example, street children in Nairobi. There have been many street children, even though now there are much less, but there are street children. And then I had this experience of a kid who had been on the street for many years, probably, running to me and asking, hey, Muzungu, or white lady, can you give me something to eat? Can you give me money to eat? And I would say, no, I'm sorry, I can't. I don't have any food with me. I'm not going to give you money.
mm-hmm.
And he would be just like, okay, that's okay. And he would be just smiling and running again, with his friends. But I guess that's just before, the all the worries get them. That's still
all the
just
what get them? I don't.
Worries, before all this.
The worries. I see. Yes. So maybe to kind of bring this home, because I mean, we're talking about larger topics, I think, and I love it. I love this discussion, but I know that there's some parents who are kind of like, well, what is it like at home? So, I mean, you having, have 5 children total, and I don't know if they're all at home with you, but what has aided you in kind of everything you've gained from being around different cultures and then your own experience in your own country? What have been a few things that have been super helpful for you and you see that have been positive in your parenting, and then maybe some things that you didn't do so well or you don't think you were so strong at and you've learned from through mistakes? If you want to share, I don't want to put you on the spot, but.
Of course I can share. For me, I have a big struggle of putting myself at the first place. That's, I think, that something that I'm struggling with for a very long time. I always try to do everything that needs to be done, even though if I'm super tired, I didn't even eat yet, and I, for example, didn't have any sleep during the night because I was, I don't know, breastfeeding a child that is teething. And that's one of my biggest mistakes that I want to change and that I want to learn, from other people and from other cultures, because I think what helps in creating harmony at home and creating a nice atmosphere is when the parents are really there, and not just physically, but emotionally. And it doesn't make a big difference if you are, for example, a mom that is working and is away the whole day, or mom at home, but who has this image of, I have to, clean the whole house, help the neighbor, do this, do that, prepare these materials for my child, and has this whole checklist, and then is not there with the child, or is super tired and is not there. So I think what helps is to stop and ask, what do I need to be more present, to be to feel more satisfied, and to feel to be here, to be here for my child in my full energy. What am I missing? And that helps me a lot. Does it make sense?
And I mean, I think going back to this is like, we can take from what other people are doing, but at the end of the day, what's going on in our own lives and what do we need as individuals in our own lives? Like, I'm just thinking about the pottying thing that you were talking about, I think in Kenya, where the parents, they have such a close relationship with their child, where they know when the child needs to go, and then they just pick them up and walk them over. But, as a full-time working mom, there's no way, like, that, literally that connection that parent has is because the child's on them most of the day. So we can't have that. So to hold ourselves to that standard of like, oh, I don't really know my child, so he's not ready to be pottied. He's already 18 months and he can't potty, like that type of stress. And we beat ourselves up. And I think, as you noted, if we're not helping ourselves, or we're beating ourselves up, I mean, imagine what are we going to do with children around us? If that's the way we're treating ourselves. So I'm with you. And it's kind of like, if we can be open about, hey, I need to fix some things. And usually the things that we really need to fix are in ourselves, not like, oh, I need to fix my child. He's the mess. It's like, no, usually it's us that needs the work first.
Of course.
And
another thing that came to my mind that I feel helped me a lot is involving the children. And I know that, in Montessori, we have all this, practical life, and do everything with your children, and try to involve them in a way that they are doing something by themselves, that they are capable of doing. But for example, we are now thinking like, okay, can my child already, I don't know, make her bed, or put the dishes in the dishwasher, fold laundry or something. And then when you look at the children, again, I would take Kenya, rural Kenya, and they, go and they fetch water a few kilometers away, and carrying the water on their heads, and help the whole family on the little farm that they have, working on the fields, cooking the dinner, taking care of the little children. Very often I see a 6-year-old having a 2-year-old, to be taken care of. And so this also helped me a lot to see that the children are much more capable of than we can even imagine.
And in you saying that, Lucie, it's shocking to me, particularly in the States, because that's my main context, but I know this is in many places in Europe as well. The extent to which there are laws that don't allow children to do certain things that would be so helpful for their lives. Like, I just have a very specific context. My wife and I didn't even mention this but I'll say, well, we're planning to start a school. And one of the things I'm finding, because it would probably be in Florida, there's this, when in opening a school, and this is for preschool, so 6 and under, you cannot have any animals in the classroom at all. So I think the only 2 exceptions, I think, is like a goldfish. I don't remember what the other one was. So you can imagine, like, it's illegal to have any other animal in the class. So there's something so disturbing about, maybe it came from good intentions, all these different regulations, like you can't have a knife in the classroom, like they don't want children hurting themselves. But man, it's so damaging, because as you're noting here in these other countries, these children are, by the time they're 6, they're capable of doing more than our 14-year-olds in the States can do. And yes. I mean, it's not to say that we aren't having amazing things with what is available in a fully civilized and modern society, but we're losing out on what these people are doing so naturally. And I know like, I'm very calm about it right now, but it to some extent, and when I'm working to do this practically, it really kind of disgusts me, because we're pushing aside our basic nature as human beings, and to be, quote, more civilized, when we're really damaging what is natural to us. And that's, taking care of ourselves, taking care of animals, working together. So I don't know, is that the same where you are in Prague, or I don't know what the laws are in early schooling, but it's definitely pretty extreme here in many states.
Well, here with the animals, there can be some animals in the classroom, but not, for example, animals that have fur, because there are many kids who are allergic to it. So in our classrooms, there are different frogs or lizards or animals like this that the kids are not allergic to, or also fish or something like that. But also there are private schools that somehow manage to have, for example, a rabbit outside of the school, or but we also have laws that the kids cannot have glasses from glass, that they have to have plastic cups, or also knives, that they can't be sharp. But somehow it's always a matter, of course, also of the I would say personal touch with the government officials that are
Yes.
coming.
Yeah. And Lucy, I would say it's the same here, but the more I find is like, maybe the sweeter you are to the person who's coming in to check on your license or something like that, or the more money you have. I know I was looking at some schools in Miami. I was talking with one person who said that, yeah, this woman came in and said her school was not up to standard for X, Y, or Z reason. And she said, but you know what? We could change things if, this is how much you would have to pay, and not pay, the licensing fee, but her as an individual, like it was a bribe. So now I don't think that's hugely going on in America, like under the table bribes, but I definitely think, you contribute to this political thing or that political thing, and then, we look the other way. So it's it's unfortunate.
Yeah.
So it's weird because I'm kind of like, I love, because we're talking about nations in Africa, and as much as there's a lot of positives in some of these nations, the government is, I'm complaining about not having knives in the classroom, but the government is literally killing people. So that's, it's much, it's all relative what we're talking about. But, since we're in education, to me, it's just so important to not be adding laws and obstacles to our ability to aid children in their lives. And that's even as parents. I mean, another thing I learned, Lucy, I'm curious where you are, but you can't just have a school at your home here in most states. So I couldn't just start a school and say, oh, I have a 4-bedroom house. I don't really, not right now, but I have a 4-bedroom house and I want to just have a school in my house and have like 25 kids. Like that's illegal.
Yeah, it's illegal here as well. You have to pass many requirements. How much air is in the house for cubic meter per child.
See, there you go. Yeah. And I don't know if you've done any of this, but then you have, as you were saying, you basically pass the things that they want. Oh, you check off this box, but some of the boxes you have to check off are just so ridiculous. And it's just, so I feel like we're putting a lot of obstacles in our way that some of these, quote, less civilized places, they don't have to deal with. They're just like, oh yeah, we just educate our kids the way we want to educate our kids or help them to grow up. But again, that can have a dark side too. If there's no government involvement and it's okay to just, beat the heck out of your kid, that's probably not a good thing either. So, so it's all a balance.
I'm sorry, but with the beating and hitting of the children, I have to say that even in Kenya, it is illegal to hit children.
Okay.
So, but of course, it is happening, but it is illegal in the laws as well. It is illegal to have more wives, or it is illegal to, to all the shocking things that we were talking about that are happening. Like if you talk about this in Nairobi as the capital, or in the cities, it doesn't happen as much. But I was talking more about the rural areas, or very poor slum areas.
And I think I've found that to be the case here in America, is that when you go to kind of, I would say, the big cities, when there is more wealth, you tend to not have the kind of old school, very stern parenting where, if your child's acting up, you hit them. I think the more rural you go in the States, the more you get kind of the old school, the children need discipline in a hitting way.
Of course. And in the older generation as well, depending on the age and on the education of the parents as well, I guess. Yep.
Yeah. And it's funny because I was just talking with this woman, and she I think I had a Montessori shirt on. She's like, "Oh, you're a teacher," and she was telling me, she's like, "Well, how do you guys do discipline?" Just a casual conversation. There was like a checker, like a cashier or something like that. And she just like, well, with my kids, I guess it's the Mexican in me. I got to keep hitting them, and I was like, and how do you respond to somebody who says something like that, But it was one of those moments where it's like, okay, how do I empathize with this parent, but at the same time be like, well, this. So we just had a really calm, cool, chill conversation about discipline and what we do in Montessori. But But yeah, again, I think that goes full circle back to, it's not going to be overnight to change people's perspective. So my view is kind of like the better I can make myself as a person, my own person, I think the better I'll have a chance of having an influence. But I'm not going around condemning people for the way that they're living their lives, particularly not at some checkout in like a grocery store, you know?
Of course, that wouldn't help, I think.
No,
But sometimes
no.
when someone asks in this, really kind way, like, and of course, I had many conversations like this when people were telling, for example, in Guatemala, I had a few conversations like this, and I guess I was younger and I was more pushy that I shouldn't have been. But also one lady was telling me how she is hitting her kids. And my answer was, so what do you do when they still, don't do what you want? And what is the next step?
Yeah.
There is no other, there's nothing else than you can do. You hit them more, or, it doesn't help. It doesn't.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, when like, even take this lady, or maybe the woman you're talking to, if they're asking me a question, because I have a Montessori shirt, or they know I'm a teacher, I mean, that's a good sign. They're looking for something. So they're not looking for you to say, well, how dare you do that to your, they're actually looking for answers. Because as you just noted, whatever parent is hitting their child for discipline, they're having difficulties as a parent, so they need some help. And maybe that's a good segue, because I think we're about to hit some, maybe even hour mark. I'm not looking at the clock, but you are actually helping other people, like, to be better as parents, be better as teachers, because you're putting on these large, online conferences. So maybe just briefly mention what you're up to, how it's helping people. And I'll definitely put a link in the show notes on MontessoriEducation.com so people can see it, but maybe just give us a sense of what you're up to in that realm.
Well, we have organized already 2 worldwide Montessori conferences online. One last November and another one in April, and another one is coming in November. And we try, I guess, to do our best to make the conferences free for everyone to attend during the week when the conference is taking place. So the last 2 conferences together had around 30,000 people attending, 13,000 at the first one, 17 at the second one. And I hope it helps. We have really great feedback from all around the world, also from these places, like Nigeria, Ghana, India, Nepal, Pakistan, everywhere, from all around the world, telling us like it's great that they have access to the speakers that they admire, people who write the books that they like to read, and even people who didn't know, for example, too much before, they get their inspiration, they get what they need. But also the parents or teachers who have had their training and they have experience for many, many years, there are talks that they can gain something from. So I guess that's what we are doing. We do the same here in Czech, but in Czech language, so that doesn't help to anyone. So I guess I would mention just this childhoodpotential.com online conference.
You said it was childhoodpotential.com, right?
Yes.
Okay. And again, I'll put a link up, but yeah, I think what you're doing is awesome. And, particularly now looking at it anew, the fact that there's so many different options, because one thing that I found in some of these conferences, they're very focused on one single thing, and then it's not really fitting for you. Or definitely in the States now, I love that you've got a lot of practical stuff that actually helps parents and teachers, because I'm finding a lot of conferences just have the topics are just, I know I'm a teacher. I know teachers. I know hundreds of teachers, thousands of parents, and they want stuff that actually can help them in the classroom or help them at home. And I think you're offering a lot of that. So it's awesome.
Yeah, I think sometimes that we have so much theory that it actually blocks us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I used to, because when when I used to teach, we'd do these parent nights, and this was my earliest days. And the topics I remember doing, like, philosophy of history in your child, that would be a topic I would do. And then, there'd be like two parents that show up because nobody wants to, I mean, you can kind of get them into it, but at the end of the day, they need topics that are actually applicable and are going to aid them. So, again, there's a time for theory and philosophy, but there's also a time for, hey, how is this going to help me tomorrow with my crazy kid or something like that,
Or how do I stop the crying child in the
yes,
in the shop?
yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Or how do I
Yeah,
how do I
like
stop my crying self or something?
that. Yes. But I
So,
also wanted to mention with the online conference that
yeah.
With the money that we have managed to get from from people who bought the access for lifetime, that they want to
Mhm.
listen to some of the talks, I don't know, in a year from now, they could buy the recordings. And from the money that we got from these sales, we supported 3 really beautiful projects. One in Turkey, and that is supporting children and moms from Syria, refugees from Syria. And they do really interesting things. They have a school for the refugee kids, but they also have a training center for the parents. And
Mhm.
they can get their Montessori education there, and then they can go and they can teach.
Yeah, I
So
love it.
this project I love, and I wanted to share about it. Then we also supported one of our schools in Kenya, which is in Nairobi, in Kibera, a very large slum. And then we also supported one school in the US, in Arizona.
Mm.
So I just wanted to
No, and
mention,
I'm
because
happy you got that in, Lucy, because I mean, even for me, that the whole refugee, particularly the parents, was what finally sold me on your conference, or at least me getting involved, because I love the idea that you are not only like, oh, we'll give them some food and shelter, but let's give them some skills that will actually aid them to take control of their own lives,
of course, because
because
only
nobody,
giving
no,
doesn't.
yeah, I mean, because at the end of the day, what most refugees really want is not to just come in and, like, because people are like, oh, they're gonna take all of our money and we're paying the tax. It's they actually just want to live free like the rest of us, you
Of
know.
course,
So,
and
and
work.
without skills, they can't do it. So I love it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I love these projects as well. So
Yep.
I'm happy we can do that.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Lucy, for coming on. It's been a pleasure. It's always eye-opening chatting with you about these different things that are going on in your experiences. So thank you.
Thank you for inviting me again.